Sure.
Sure. I'll take that. Do you want me to hang your clip?
That's 3 years ago.
Okay.
Just to see that difference. Yeah.
Would you like to turn your phones on to silent? Thank you.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
We're nearly there.
Yeah.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Arup and welcome to the people online, although I think Andy will do that as well. I'm just here for the safety moment. There is no planned fire alarm today, but if there is an alarm sounded, then we have to take to the muster point at Fitzroy Square. But there are plenty of us here to follow. Me and the 4 people at the back there all know the way as well, so they'll all be very happy to support. Cloak, coats, I think you've seen, coat racks there, drinks outside, and there are toilets over in the corner. And that's it from me. Over to Andy.
Thank you very much, Steph. So good evening, everybody. Welcome to those of you who are here and those online to the AGM for the International Special Interest Group. For those of you that I haven't met, my name is Andy Candlant. I am current chair of the ISIG. We have sufficient voting members in the room and online today, so we are quorate, so any elections to the committee, etc., will be valid. So first, I'd like to thank Steph and all the team at Arup and the Good Eating Company for hosting us tonight. It's really appreciated and really put on a great event for us. Thank you very much. So first of all, I'd like to just kick off with a quick review of the last year. It's my first year in the chair of the ISIG. Started this time last year with the AGM, which was online. So in addition to the usual AGM business of elections, etc., we had a fascinating presentation from Tim and Leesman on the office is dead, long live the office. We then followed that up with our first face-to-face knowledge and networking event for a long time, which was kindly hosted by Mishcon Dereya in London. And we looked at AI in health and safety, which was a follow-on from our Leaders Forum in 2021. We had a very successful study tour in April, which was kindly organised and hosted by our Deputy Chair, Sean Gibbons, and his team in Switzerland. So we visited Lausanne and also a couple of other places between Lausanne, and visited Basel to the Roche HQ where Sean is based. And we ended up going to a prestigious location in Geneva. Sean will tell us more about that in a few minutes' time. We had a very successful event to celebrate World FM Day earlier this year, which was kindly hosted for us in London by Skanska. and aligned with the World FM Day theme of FM really delivering value, we focused on social value in facilities management and how FM can really add to the value delivered to our communities and locals, local organisations. And of course, today it's our AGM again, so there will be the usual procedural general meeting activities, and then we've got Tim Oldman from Leesman again to give us an exciting presentation a bit later on this evening. So before we carry on, I would like to express our sincere thanks to some long-standing committee members who have supported the ISIG for a number of years and had contributed significant expertise and dedication to the success of the ISIG, who are now sort of retiring from their committee roles. So Ed Baldwin, Howard Murray and Claire Selleck have been really valued colleagues on the committee over a number of years, and really like to express our thanks and the thanks of the wider ISIG community to those colleagues as they step down from committee activities. Lastly, from me, there are a few changes which are taking place in the International SIG. First of all, I will be standing down as chair because unfortunately my day job no longer allows me the time that the ISIG requires and deserves to lead it. So unfortunately, I'm not able to continue the journey I've been on for the last year, but I'd like to thank everybody who's been involved in our activities, everybody on the committee in particular, and also to all the members for your support and participation over the last 12 months. Thank you all very much. So this evening we're handing over to a new leadership team, and they will be taking the ISIG forward as we start to align the SIG with the recent work that IWFM have done in developing their community groups and reshaping the way that community groups work. So there'll be a call to action to ISIG members and stakeholders, which Steve will reference later. There'll be an opportunity for yourselves as members to get involved with shaping the future and the direction of the International SIG. So lastly, I think with that, it's time for us to move into the formal process of the AGM. So I'll hand over to Paul.
Well, if I can extend my welcome as well to everybody this evening. It's great to be back together again for an event. We've not had as many events as we would have liked this year, but your participation and support is very much appreciated. Thanks to Steph and the team for making the facilities available here. That's much appreciated. And on behalf of the committee, to say a huge thank you to Andy for his leadership over the last year or so. It's a hugely demanding job in and of itself, but over and above a hugely demanding day job. I think lots of us can identify with the challenges of fitting in other things around the day job. So thank you, Andy. Thank you for the perseverance and the persistence you've given it over the last 12 months. So thank you from the committee and from all the ISIG members. So for those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Paul Phillips. I'm ISIG Treasurer for My Sins. So I've got two jobs really. One is to just give you a brief update, very brief update on our finances, and to really lead the election of Andy's successor before I hand over to that person. So we started the year with a very healthy opening balance of £6,933, which is remarkable for two reasons. One, we were without a main sponsor for a number of years, and it was down to our perseverance and persistence with IWFM to allow us to carry that amount forward with quite a detailed budget, which took me quite a bit of time to put together, with lots of planned events. Now, unfortunately, again, this year, we've not been able to have as many events as we would have liked for various reasons. So we will be going back to the IWFM to ask that we are permitted to carry forward what is still quite a healthy balance of £5,600 into next year, because we will again put together a very detailed budget of some planned events that we would hope to be able to carry on into next year with your support. So a very healthy place to be, but we are still without a main sponsor. Appreciate, with lack of events in this year, it's difficult for us to reach out to sponsors without a planned program. So we will be looking to do that. We've updated our document, which is an opportunity for sponsors. So if you would like to see that document, please do ask any of the committee members. We'd be glad to share that with you for potential sponsorship going forward. So thank you for that. So any questions immediately arising? Thank you. So it comes to me to lead the election of a new chair, an interim chair. Now, somebody who's a very familiar face to us. He's online. It's good to see you, Steve. And it's great to have Steve back joining us in our events. Steve has kindly agreed to step in as an interim chair for the ISIG for the foreseeable. So we need to officially put his name forward and to vote in that regard. Now, we are quorate. So the proposal is that Steve Gladwin resumes a previous role as chair of the ISIG, which is supported by the committee. So do I have support? Would you like to raise your hand? Yeah, show of hands. Thank you. Anybody against? So Steve, welcome back, sir.
Thank you very much, Paul. I can't see the audience, so I was glad I didn't see any hands not going up. But there you go.
It was fully supported, Steve. So welcome back, sir. So I shall hand over to yourself.
Okay, so just carrying on that theme, if you can all hear me, just a few little formal things, and then I'll give a more informal address. We need to elect our vice chair, which is Sean Gibbons. Sean took on the vice chair and is happy to stand again. So I'll go through all of these and we can just have a proposer and a seconder. We also need to ratification of the current ISIG committee members, and that would be Andy Candlin, Sean, myself, Philip Kennedy, Joanna Lloyd-Davis and Paul Phillips. And then we also need to formally ratify new members, including Lucy Stone, Kerry Connolly, Steph Welsh and Amy Whittaker. So all of those people are nominated for those current positions as vice chair, members of the committee. So I just need a proposer and a seconder to ratify all of those, please.
Preferably somebody who hasn't got a name there. Would somebody like to do that?
Indeed.
Can you do that? Yeah, okay. Yeah, done.
Done, Steve.
Okay, thanks very much. And before we get into the more interesting proceedings of tonight's event, which is a presentation by our Vice Chair, Sean, about the Switzerland trip and what's almost become our annual presentation from Tim and the Leesman Index, I just wanted to say a few words about the question why. In fact, 5 whys, which has nothing to do with the maintenance and problem-solving technique called the 5 whys principle, but perhaps more seeking out the position of the International Special Interest Group and where we are today and where we might be going in the future. For those that don't know me, there might be some few people in the audience, it's their first event. My name is Steve Gladwin, and it was a great honour and a privilege for me to be the chair of the ISIG for over 7 years, until I passed over the baton to Andy last year. And when I was the chair of the ISIG, I would always tell my fellow committee members that being a volunteer had to come second, third and fourth after family life, after our health and well-being, after work. So when committee members would often come to me and say, oh, look, I'm flat out at work, I need to resign off the ISIG committee, I would say, well, don't fully resign, just take a sabbatical. And so many of our committee members, past and present, have had those sabbaticals, me included, which this year included about 12 weeks of backpacking around South America and Australia with my eldest daughter. And Andy's in exactly the same position. Well, he's not backpacking around South America, but I think as he said, and as Paul said, the work commitments of Andy and his career just mean that he's had to take that step back. So I would echo those vote of thanks from Paul and say, Andy, you've done a wonderful job over the last 12 months and thank you. And I'm so pleased that you're staying on the committee. That leads on to why an interim and why me as the interim chair. Well, when I stepped down and handed over to Andy, I truly believed it was time for some fresh ideas and new thinking into the ISIG. And I still think that today. I still think that we need some new thinking to reevaluate our position. And so I see my role as very much interim and acting as a facilitator to support the development of perhaps a new strategy. And once that strategy is complete, and once we know what our raison d'etre is, then it'll be time to me to hand over the reins to the chair designate. And Steph Welsh has kindly volunteered to actually take that role on, with Sean providing that continuity as vice chair. That leads on to another why. And when I'm developing any strategy, when I'm training on developing FM strategy, I always start off with the question, why? Why do we exist? Often we talk about the what we do. We talk about the how we do it, but we don't often talk about the why. And I always encourage people to look up a TED talk by Simon Sinek, an 18-minute TED talk called Starting Off With Why. And that's what we've got to do as an ISIG, reevaluate why we exist. And when I took on the role in 2015, I sat down with the existing committee. I sat down with Neil Everett, Linda Husmanis, and members of the support team, and we developed our why. And we was always bridging that gap between being a home for our people internationally that didn't fit under a region. We were also acting as that knowledge and networking group for people with interest in international practices, which is why we do the study group, which is why we have people like Tim providing these excellent presentations about employee sentiment to the workplace. So we were multiple whys, but it was always difficult back then to engage. I think COVID has changed lots of things, including the ability to bring these interactive presentations from people wherever they're sitting in the world. I just happen to be up in Cheshire at the moment, but Sean's probably somewhere else in the world. I don't know where Sean's these days, but he gets all over the place. So things have changed, and I think we just need to go back to the drawing board and look at why we exist and how we support and improve the value proposition to our members, how we support and improve FM as a profession. And so part of my role with the committee, with the members, with people like Neil, Jonathan, Linda in head office, to actually reevaluate what our future is. And that probably leads on to my last why, which is why volunteer. For me, volunteering as the chair, volunteering in any role over the last 15, 20 years with IWFM and before that BIFM, has always been exceptionally rewarding. I've learnt so much. I've met so many people all over the world. So once we know our strategy, I'll be calling as many people as I can to get involved in this committee, get involved in the group. It's such a rewarding experience volunteering, and I would urge you all to read an article in this latest edition of Facilitate by Greg Davis, one of Paul Phillips' colleagues, and he talks about why volunteer. So on a final note, before I hand over to Sean, I just wanted to say a massive thank you to all of our volunteers on the committee, past and present, and I would encourage anyone in the room tonight or anyone online to get involved in being an ambassador for the IWFM. It's so rewarding. Now that leads on to our vice chair and Sean, wherever you are in the world, just giving us a bit of an overview of, I think it's probably our third international study tour. We had one to Copenhagen, one to Amsterdam, and there's a very happy looking bunch of people sampling, probably not Swiss chocolate, but whatever they were doing at the time. Sean, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Thanks very much for the intro. Evening, everybody. I guess we're going to run through the slides that are on the screen now, or do you want me to present? Either way, I'll just ask you to jump onto the next slide. So, yeah, good evening, everyone. Sean Gibbons, as Andy and Steve said, Vice Chair of International Special Interest Group. Also got a day job, which is heading up Roche's facility management and real estate team based out in Basel, Switzerland. So this evening, what I'd like to do is to give you a very brief overview of the study tour that took place this year over a 2-day period in Switzerland. So we set off from the German-speaking canton of Basel, up in the northwest part, basically on the border with Germany and France. There we visited Roche, which is a multinational pharmaceutical company. Then we went to Swiss Railways, their largest maintenance facility, which is in Olten. And then we worked our way down to the French-speaking region, starting in Lausanne, where we visited Logitech. They're a Swiss company, multinational manufacturer of computer peripherals and software. And then we concluded our visit to the United Nations and their impressive campus, which overlooks Lake Geneva. If you can go to the next slide, please. So first on the list was Roche, founded in 1896. It's one of the largest biotech companies in the world, employing about 100,000 people, 13,000 of which are based in Basel. And the Global Real Estate and FM team, which I head up, we support workplace users in more than 100 countries around the world. So we gave an overview to the ISIG of our journey to ISO 41001 accreditation. And then we brought in our young talent to basically explain what is the role, what are the opportunities they get working within a global function in a multinational. The provision of networking opportunities, an environment that helps them to explore the business, the opportunity to work independently, participate in internship communities, whilst enjoying frequent contact and guidance with their manager. We also discussed generally the increased competition that exists everywhere for high potential candidates, and the difficulty in employing people in a non-EU country, which obviously in the UK, similar challenges exist. And for us, certainly it results in quite a time-intensive process. And also the fact that young talent are often just unaware of the opportunities that exist outside of the provider market. We also touched a little bit on the Swiss facility management market. Due to the mountainous terrain in Switzerland, only just over 5% of the surface area of Switzerland can actually be built on. But having said that, there's still a huge number of buildings, and there's 250,000 people that are employed in property management. Leading FM providers in Switzerland are ISS, are Bouygues, and CBRE. And the type of challenges that they face are familiar ones. There's a shortage of skilled labor. There's a lot of pressure on costs. Switzerland is an expensive country, both for materials and labor. And there's also a reluctance generally within Swiss corporates to embrace integrated FM solutions, which brings with itself a number of challenges. If we can go to the next slide, please. So the next stop we made was to Swiss Federal Railways, or SBB. They took us through the history of the Swiss railway system. They moved from lots and lots of individual providers, sounds familiar, to now one operator for the whole of the country. They also shared the challenges about operating railways in such mountainous terrain, which has led to the construction of many, many tunnels, including the 57-kilometer long Gotthard Tunnel, which is the core of the Transalpine railway access link with Italy. They transport around about 1.2 million passengers a day, and they have a pretty reasonably sized property portfolio that they own and operate and maintain. Recently, the Swiss railways have started to implement drone usage. So they're using drones to map out their infrastructure, which is then embedded into BIM models. And this is used to support condition assessments of their assets and planning the whole life cycle replacement exercise that takes place. They talked a little bit about maintenance of trains. So they have 14 maintenance facilities. These are generally used for short services where every 6 to 8 weeks, every single individual carriage on the network is brought in for a minor, more like a clean and brush up. They also have 4 larger facilities, and Alton, the one that we visited, is the biggest one. And every 10 to 12 years, all the trains are brought in for a longer period of time, and that's basically a stripped down and complete overhaul of all of the components. Challenges they face, well, over the years, new models of trains have been introduced, and they're starting to experience issues with availability of parts, and actually leading to the need for them to manufacture components that are now redundant, and to educate employees to be able to work on lots and lots of different models. So that was a really interesting location. So if we can jump to the next slide, please. So next location was Logitech. So Swiss company, multinational manufacturer of computer peripherals and software. They got their global HQ in Lausanne, and we visited their main R&D facility. And this is where they develop and test prototypes of new products. They work very closely with the EPFL University. In fact, their office is actually located on the campus of the university, which enables them to easily involve students in their projects and to find qualified interns and personnel. So the head of FM for Logitech gave us some candid insights into their transition to hybrid working and some of the mistakes they made. So when they started the move, far too many desks. So from their observations, it seemed that people mostly come into the office to collaborate. They have a need for more meeting rooms and spaces that support these activities, and therefore less individual workstations. Usual challenges that we all face: big inconsistency in the office population. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, pretty busy. Mondays and Fridays, empty. So Albert was explaining that the allocations of space were based primarily on a wish list and the want to satisfy the perceived requirements of individual staff members who said they were going to come into the office 4 days a week. Well, the reality is quite different. And he mentioned that this has led to some fairly suboptimal outcomes. And another aspect, again, we've been through this as well: legal, HR departments demand private workspaces sealed off from the rest of the organization. But Albert mentioned that this is the most underutilized space in the entire building, being empty pretty much throughout the week. Again, I'm sure this resonates with a lot of people here today. So, sorry, was there a comment there or? No, okay, great. So from there we headed down to Geneva and to the United Nations, to their Lakeside campus, which was actually gifted to the League of Nations by the Swiss government about 100 years ago, and where the construction of the original building started in the late 1920s. So they provided an overview of their strategic heritage plan. So they're currently renovating their old buildings built from the 30s all the way through to the 1970s. Another big area of focus for them is dramatically improving accessibility for disabled people. So, for example, guidance strips are placed throughout the campus, automated doors, access lifts, as well as workstations that are wheelchair friendly. And then we visited the new office, which is built in effectively to the side of the landscape, beautifully landscaped with amazing views over the lake. But with that came a big shift away from the traditional hierarchy-based allocations of working spaces. And as a result, now they've got very few assigned desks. Senior management still have their private rooms and workstations. But one of the most important elements to integrate into their design was flexibility. So they've got a lot of movable walls, that kind of thing. Through the design, they've tried to make the best use of natural daylight, moving desks close to windows, facilities, meeting facilities, breakout spaces, that kind of thing, into the center of the design, which is quite different to the old layout in the previous locations. The FM team also gave a quick presentation around the challenges that they face in managing a portfolio of facilities spanning almost 100 years in age. So that was the roundup for the 2 days, and that's the end of my very, very brief summary of this year's study tour. If anyone has any specific questions on any of the visits, feel free to reach out to me separately. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sean. And I'm sure when we've had Tim's presentation, we'll open up the floor for Q&A, both of your presentation and of Tim's. And it was nice that people can reach out to you and maybe come and see you in Switzerland one day. Okay, before I hand over to Tim, one thing that I realised I neglected to do when I was doing my formal proceedings was to ask for a proposer and a seconder separately for Steph Welsh as our chair designate. I mentioned her being the chair designate in my informal proceedings, but back to a formal proceeding, I do need to ask for a proposer and a seconder for Steph Welsh to take over.
John, thank you.
That's Steve.
Yep, okay.
You there? Okay.
You tell him.
One thing I realised I neglected to do in my formal proceedings was ask for a proposer and a seconder for Steph Welsh.
We're all okay.
Yeah, okay. So you've heard all of that, right?
Yeah, we've had. Thank you.
Excellent. Good on you. Good on you. Well, look, we're really here to not only listen to Sean, but to listen to Tim. And like I said, this has become almost like an annual presentation that Tim Oldman from the Leesman Index gives us. And this, I'm sure Tim will do better than me at talking about who he is and what he does, but it's an absolutely fabulous piece of research. Leesman are the world's largest benchmarker of employee workplace experience. And this data and the insights that we get from all of Tim's hard work across multiple organizations enables facility managers and workplace professionals to really understand how we can give employees an outstanding experience. And this data comes from people like JP Morgan Chase, Zurich, AstraZeneca, big companies, small companies. including the government property agency. And I would encourage people, when they've listened to Tim, maybe to look at the government property agency's latest property strategy and their facilities management strategy documents that are online, because it's a real shift in actually providing employees with a great workplace. So enough from me, over to you, Tim.
Thanks very much, Steve. Thank you, Sean. A lot of what the guys have gone through, I'm going to take you through and amplify a little bit more, actually. There was no briefing. We didn't set this up, but it segues beautifully into some of the stuff that I'm going to take you through this evening. It's awesome to be back. Joanna, I think this is about the 5th time I've spoke at one of the AGMs, so it is becoming a bit of a tradition. I'm cool with that. I love it. And hopefully you'll go away. And what I really hope is you'll go away and do something different tomorrow. I hope that what I give you is a bit of a call to arms and a bit of a sort of a straighter spine or broader shoulders to take on some of the everyday challenges that you have in your professional careers. Last year, I talked to you about this.
Could we
Joanna.
just check that the people online can hear you, because you're not in front of the mic on the desk?
Steve, Sean, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Good.
that's better though when you're right
Okay.
in front.
All right, I'll stay here. I hate standing behind a lectern. I feel like I'm at...
Sorry, we've got a plan. We've got a plan.
No, I'll stay behind the lectern. Don't give me a handheld. That'll go desperately wrong. Conference organisers hate me. I like walking around the stage. I like getting involved in it. So, look, purposeful presence we talked about last year. This is the research that was fresh off of the press from my team. Sean was very kind, and he said all of Tim's hard work. And it's not my hard work. I have a lot of fun. It's my team who do all the hard work. 3 of them here if you want to grill them for insights afterwards. We talked about purposeful presence last year. Sean mentioned the amazing work of Simon Sinek. If there's one piece of literature that I advise you so strongly to read, it's not one of these that I brought with me for you to take away and read. Actually, it's Simon Sinek's latest book, which is called The Infinite Game. Because actually it describes something really acute to me, and it's not in there specifically, but I came away with that with a really acute insight into the challenges that you will face in your everyday work, which is that the organizations you work for are playing the infinite game. And you'll understand more about this if you read Simon's book. But it's a game with no end, and it's a game with very flexible and, if invisible, outer perimeters. It's the games that organizations play to just do what they do every single day. They play by their own rule set, but they're playing an infinite game. They're not playing to win in a short-term period. They're playing to be around forever. JP Morgan, who mentioned Zurich, AstraZeneca. These companies aren't playing to be the best ever and then pack up and go home. They're playing to stay forever in their businesses. Yet what they're doing when they outsource work is they're appointing professionals like you on short-term contracts. So you're playing, if you're in one of those service provider environments, you're playing by the opposite rule set. You're playing a finite game. You're playing to win in a 3-year stretch. And it suddenly occurred to me when I got to the last chapter in the book that that's the problem in facilities management. We've got different players playing to different rules. They're playing different games. Now, the game's got even more complicated, and hence purposeful presence. Because what we found out as people started coming back after the pandemic is that employees were coming back as your biggest, newest stakeholder. You thought it was easy until the pandemic came along. Suddenly, the employees have made it very, very complicated. And what we found in the data was that employees were coming back with very specific purpose in mind. They were coming to the office to do specific things. And if you can't deliver on those specific things, they were going away from the office disenfranchised with their trip. Before the pandemic, people traveling to offices almost on a daily basis for most employees in knowledge economies. The cost of traveling to work was part of a cost of living. It was just something that you were offered a role in a business somewhere and you just accepted. There was like a dress code that cost you stuff. You don't wear this stuff at the weekends, do you? This is work dress, right? And it costs you to maintain it, to buy it. It costs you to commute to your workplace. If you work in London, you've got the Pret tax or the after work beer with the boss tax, right? And all of those things pre-pandemic were just the cost of living. You wrote it off against your salary. Suddenly, post-pandemic, they're a cost of working, which suddenly means you're in a totally different environment with the employees of the organizations whose spaces you run and you manage, because they're coming like consumers of workplace. It's like coming to the workplace and they expect it to pay back. They expect to earn the commute from them. They've committed time and they've committed money, and there's a new contractual landscape that you're entering. So if you weren't here last year and if you've not seen this, all of this stuff that I'm going to talk you through is available online, and I bought a few of the copies of the hard stuff if you're more old-fashioned like me and you like scribbling in the margins. So purposeful presence. That's what we talked about last year. But the landscape has changed again. Yet again, we see fluctuations in the data, and we're collecting hundreds of thousands of data points a year. Sean mentioned some of the SBB, Flavio's client in Switzerland that we work with across the whole estate. Steve mentioned some of our other clients. JP Morgan Chase are about to go live on a survey to 200 of their largest assets, 200,000 plus employees globally will be receiving our tool. More than 100 countries, more than 40 languages, we deliver the standard tool. Every given day of the year, there is probably a survey live for a client somewhere. So we're constantly ingesting all of this data. But what I built was a business that has another side. We've got the commercial side that ingests all this information on the basis of clients. But on the other side of the business, we have the not-for-profit bit. That's the bit that I hang out in most of the time. That's the bit where we have the real fun. That's where our academics play with your data. We take that responsibility really seriously. So everything that I'm presenting to you today is part of that side of the business, the bit where the academics have fun to see what they can find. And what they found is a number of things in the current data around control, influence, and accept. And I'd like you to think about those, keep those words in the back of your mind as I go through the data. And for each of these data, small data insights I give you, I would like you to think about whether you can control what is happening in that slide, whether you can nudge or influence it slightly, or whether you just have to write it off and accept that it's way out of your professional league. And I'd like you to think about every single one of them. And then at the end, we're going to reflect on whether these are things that you can truly influence and through things that you can change, or whether they are things that are just happening and then they're beyond your control. And it's a really important milestone, I think, for the facilities management industry. Steve mentioned it in terms of the work that he's doing with the IWFM centrally, in terms of what is the role of facilities management in the future of people and place on that equation. And I think it's at a pivotal point right now. So before we look at the data, if you are in a position where you procure stuff, I'd like to just put out a little blatant advert for an amazing movement that we're part of called the B Corporation movement. This is a small and very elite group of organizations. There are just 1,500 in the UK. There are some FM companies now who have been awarded their B Corporation certification, some contract caterers, food and beverage providers, B Corp certified. It is a new global certification for organizations that balance profit with purpose. So we're not just in it for the shareholders. We're in it for the wider good. And clearly we qualify because of that other part of our business that basically plays with the data and provides it all to you at no additional cost. So if you're in a position where you procure stuff and you can lean on the potential to involve one of these types of organizations, I like to think you're going to get a more purpose-driven organization. So purpose coming through as a bit of a theme this evening. Right, that's what we do. That's our job, is to arm you, regardless of whether you're a customer or a client of Leaseman or not, is to arm you with the data and insights that enable you to do something different tomorrow in your professional roles. If you go away this evening and I haven't changed your mind about anything, I failed as the chief exec and the leader of Leaseman, right? So that's my job. You need to verify at the end of the evening, maybe over a glass, as to whether you're going to attach anything different to your work profile tomorrow. And this is the first one I want you to think about. Remember that control, influence, or accept. Are you going to accept this and just write it off as a thing that's happening? Are you going to try and exercise some control, or are you going to try and influence it completely? Do you have an option to work in a hybrid way? So in your organization, to what extent do you influence how much people work in a hybrid fashion? You might think you don't. You might think that's the chief exec or the global head of HR to dictate how hybrid people are. I would argue the opposite. I think if you're an FM, you are more in control of hybrid work than the ExCo leadership team above you. Because what we know is 88% of employees globally are working in a hybrid way of some sort. The world is hybrid. The hybrid genie is not going back in the lamp. Forget it, right? It's here to stay. Get used to the idea. But guess what? The experience that you provide in the place of work directly influences how often somebody comes into the office. Every single time, every survey we do, forget the commute, forget your gender, forget your age, your career stage, all of that jazz. It primarily comes down to the quality of the experience that the employee has when they commit to come in and when they go home in the evening? Have they had an awesome day at work that enables them to be the best version of themselves that they can be? If they can tick that box, guess what? They come in more. So in a control, influence, or accept, don't just accept what the chief exec says. Don't just accept the latest mandate from HR. You're in control of how often people come into the office. Way more than they are, I would argue. Because if the experience is rubbish, it doesn't matter whether the chief exec is expecting them to come in 4.5 days a week. They won't come in. And then you've got other challenges on your hands. This is the flip side one. This is one that I'm worried about. There is a difference. And I think actually Joanna and I first met when Julie Cortens asked me to come into the Women in FM group, because she asked us to see whether we could find any difference about the experience that females had in the workplace compared to men in the workplace. We couldn't find anything in the data. Guess what? Now we can. Stuff's happening because of COVID in terms of the experience that different genders have in the workplace. And here we've got one with an acute difference. 47% of men report sometimes or frequently feeling socially disconnected when working remotely, compared to 39%. Pretty much every auditorium I presented this in, all the women sit there with a smug smile on their face saying, yeah, because we know how to socially connect with our networks. You men are useless at it. Whatever the reason behind it, something's going on here. And we all know about the impact on our mental well-being if individuals start to feel socially isolated. So once again, this is in your control. Employees are coming back to the office and they expect to feel socially connected when they're back in the workplace. They expect to have a great, productive day in the workplace, but they also expect to be socially connected with colleagues. They want to like their colleagues. I don't necessarily want to hang out with them in a yoga class before the office hours start, or to go to choir practice in the evening. But I can tell you, in certain clients, we know that yoga and choir practice are real motivators to people to come back because they're social activities. But the difference here on genders is something you need to be concerned and thoughtful about and design for in that creation of a workplace experience. 50% of employees, when they come back, attach a social activity to it after work. So if you've got a major workplace in a city centre, you are fueling the nighttime economy in those cities, in those towns. Because your employees are grabbing a drink on the way home, or they're going to the theatre, or they're doing something else social, right? They're consuming local economies. So we're asking this question, this is in partnership with MIT on a 3-year longitudinal study to help inform governments of the impacts on cities of hybrid working. So once again, your control, influence, or accept goes way beyond the workplace. You're impacting the future of cities. You're impacting the future of urban environments. The death of cities or the flourishing of cities sits in your hands to control. If you provide an outstanding experience in the workplace, employees come back. Employees come back and they socialize in the nighttime economy outside of work. 28% of respondents would like more opportunities to socialize, not just after work, in work as well. So JP Morgan at their data center down in Bournemouth, choir practice is a massive thing. Take out the resistance kit from the gym. You don't need that stuff. The gym goers, guess what? They go to the gym anyway, right? If they're body conscious, they're out at the gym at home. They don't need your gym. What they need is social enterprise. They need social connectivity excuses. They want to be together with their colleagues and have a bit of chilled fun. So think about what you can do to fuel these social connections. Because again, guess what? The more social connectivity you provide, the more people want to come to the office. They don't need a mandate to come to the office. They need some fun excuses to come to the office. It's got to be able to support their productivity when they get there, because if you're rubbish at the meeting rooms, you're rubbish at the colleague conferences, you're rubbish at all the focus work at the desk, forget it. The social doesn't compensate for that. But there is an element you can do to accentuate the attractiveness of the workplace through fueling these types of activities. So here's my connection with Sean. Sean and I have met in Basel at their amazing space. If you ever get an opportunity to tap him up for a visit, you must go and see it. The views from the top are spectacular. But this is where my intrigue in workplace started. In Basel, well, just over the river in Weil am Rhein, actually, but the other space is in Basel. This was an office I worked at for about 6 years. Many of you know Vitra. They're one of the world's most renowned privately owned furniture manufacturers. It was a huge privilege for me to work directly with Hans-Peter Cohn, the chief exec, and Rolf Fehlbaum, the founder, on strategy across the portfolio. And this was the office I found myself in most of the time. It's a 1980s wrinkly tin shed. It's not that inspiring. Unless you're somebody from Arup and you're an engineer and you know this is a piece of prefabricated history, because this went up super fast, and that's why they won the competition to rebuild this building when a fire burnt down the previous distribution centre that was on campus. If you can tap up Sean for a visit and get an excuse to go to Basel, also go and see this space, because it's really inspiring. There are more architectural prize winners on this campus than anywhere else in the world in a confined space. Zaha Hadid built her first building under Rolf Fehlbaum's sponsorship here, the fire station. It's incredible. Tadeo Ando, all sorts of incredible architects have done stuff under Rolf's stewardship. But this is where I had to rock up once every 5 or 6 weeks to a boring, wrinkly tin shed, uninspiring, with some nice branded vehicles outside and a whole load of furniture factoring going on underneath. Except for one thing. This is on the first floor of the space. You can get access to it. They'll show you around quite willingly. Then it was called the network office. And it's an office designed by Sevil Peach. You probably never heard of Sevil. She keeps quite a low profile, Turkish-born English interior designer. And she designed this space in partnership with the team at Vitra. If you can read an architectural plan, you'll recognize pretty quickly this is very deep. It's about 25 meters deep, so natural light is a bit of a challenge, all sorts of things going on here. But I can tell you, when you came in the staircase and through across the front corridor here, drop your bag at these little blue workstations just to the sort of left, the right of the plan, or the hot desks, touchdown. You then grab a coffee. Within a couple of minutes, one of the German colleagues had spotted you and you were stuck there for about half an hour catching up. It was incredibly sociable space. And I loved working here. You literally came away from a day working here feeling more energized than you'd arrived there in the morning. And I wanted to work out why. And so effectively, after I left Vitra, the journey through my workplace world was to try and compute what made Seville space so incredible. Things like there are only 4 fully enclosed spaces, cellular spaces in that plan. Yet it accommodates, about 150 people. So it seemed really light on cellular accommodation. It seemed really deep. It defied all logic as to why it was such a healthy, powerful space to be based in. And this quiet space at the back, the library, was open. There were no doors on the library, yet the library was always quiet. So how did she pull it off, Seville, through the placement of, if you like, the articulation of the space? That's what I wanted to find a way of scientifically capturing or mathematically capturing. Here are some photographs. They're much earlier than when I worked there, from 2000. Seville captured these when it was first delivered. So you can see they're a bit grainy. There's a few fashion trends in here which wouldn't look okay today, but maybe they're coming round again. This is the main corridor space across the front of the building. The views over the cherry orchards and the vineyards beyond. So it's stunning views. You can see a desk phone if you look really closely. That tells you how old the photos are. What Seville also did was punch these patios through. So they were like internal open garden spaces in the main office. So if you just wanted to sort of step outside, you didn't have to go outside the office. You went inside the office to go outside the office. And clearly it's full of cool furniture and stuff that makes it feel bright and airy. This is the library at the back of the space with one of the patios just to the left. This is something else Seville's really good at, is vistas and views through things. So this is one of the circular windows out across the meeting space to the patio beyond, and then back to the library. The books are still there in exactly the same place, right? And that was the desk that I would sit at when I came to visit, overlooking the orchard. And there were little things, little features in the design. So that main space, the office space, was up 2 steps, which from a disability perspective, you think that's a nuts idea, because you've got to have ramps everywhere for people to access it. But what it meant was when I was sat down at the hot desk, if anybody else walked along the corridor, they were at eye level with me. They weren't looking down on me. And so actually, I could stay sat down and have a conversation with somebody who was buzzing past me, and psychologically we were equals. And it was little stuff like that that I spotted that Seville had done, and I wanted to work out why that was so special. So this is the birth of Leisman, right? It all happened just over the border from Basel in Weil am Rhein. So was it possible to measure what made that space outstanding? I thought it was. All of these clients also think it's possible to measure what makes the space outstanding. Just some of the clients that we're working with globally, some renowned names on there. BCG just across the other side of the street at 18 Charlotte Street, an amazing space that we used often for our events. We also have an elite category, our Leisman Plus spaces. These are spaces that achieve on our index a score of 70 or above. Arups have got some offices that they've measured using our tool that have achieved this status. You have to have a statistically robust response rate, but it's a tiny group. Less than 2% of our global workplaces achieve this accolade. So clients now set this as an objective for their design teams and their supply teams. They're briefed to try and achieve Leaseman Plus certification because it's a measure of not outstanding design, not outstanding aesthetic. It's not design award. It's that this space works for the users award. And that's what gets people back to offices today. Not because it looks pretty, but because it works beautifully. These are some of the more recent accolades. So Standard Chartered have used us since 2017. A lot of you know Mace Macro, Ross Abate, one of our good friends. Ross introduced us when Standard Chartered were going out to market. They were going out to 3 markets, to 3 contractors they wanted to appoint. And one of the parts of the bid was a global CSAT survey. And Ross phoned the client and said, that's a stupid idea because CBRE will pitch one product up, JLL will pitch another, and I'm going to pick a third one. What's the point in measuring a global portfolio with 3 different measurement standards? Why don't you use Leaseman? And the client used us, and we've been working with them since 2017 on the global portfolio on an annual basis ever since. Year on year on year, they've gone up the index because they empower their contractors and their supply chains below them to understand how to write a business plan based on the data that we provide them with. So Flavio and his team do a heap of work looking after them every year. We've just measured their retail portfolio as well, which is super interesting. BCG, I mentioned, just the other side of the street at 18 Charlotte Street, an amazing space. Go and look at it if you ever get an excuse to have a look. A lot of our events we host there, they love having us back to the events. Wells Fargo, one of the biggest retail banks in the US, measured their global portfolio. This is one of their new spaces. Again, one of Flavio's clients. So grill him if you're in retail banking, you want to know more about the work we do across retail and the office portfolio. BHP, difficult world to be in at the moment, right? Raping the earth of its mineral resources. But what they've done is built amazing workplaces because talent attraction and talent retention is difficult when you're in an industry that's not politically correct at the moment. If you're going through Switzerland, look at what's happened to all the tobacco companies, right? They're all headquartered, a lot of them are headquarters there, and they're all suffering from a similar sort of proposition. So what can you do from a workplace perspective to help the employment attractiveness? And then last one, and Steve mentioned this in terms of the GPA. We've worked with them now for 5 years, 4 years. Under Stephen Boyd's direction. Stephen is a really clear-sighted chief executive for the GPA. He's just announced he's going to move on to another post. But I haven't worked with a client who have taken this to heart so much in probably the last 4 or 5 years. Everything they do is user-centric design now, using our data to fuel that exploration. What I'm proud about for this space, which is in Birmingham, Stevenson Street, I'm there next week for another industry event, is this space has to pass the Daily Mail test. The budget here is a fraction of the budget that all of those rich companies that I've just shown you have available to them. These are not management consultants billing the highest hourly rate they can get away with. These are not mineral companies that are charging huge sums for their minerals, right? This is a cost-constrained scheme. Even worse, it's in a landlocked building that used to be a Woolworths department store at the back end of Birmingham on a grubby street where the tram rattles past every 3 minutes. But they've achieved a Leaseman Plus award because they've designed a user-centric experience that supports those civil servants come in every day and do an amazing day at work. So it's achievable for all. But this is the problem we've got. We have a home index as well. So that's the HLMI on the right of that screen. And the home index measures the experience employees have at home. Don't worry too much about the number. It's a 0 to 100 scale. But what you can see here quite clearly, and this is our most quoted tabloid headline, not in the Daily Mail, but in many other reputable journals. The average home supports the average knowledge worker better than the average office. So if you've got an average office, close it down. You'll get much quicker to your net zero targets if you just close the office. The employees don't need it. Just let them stay at home. They're going to have a more effective day there. You'll have an easier job. You won't have to worry about your net zero targets. All that facility management, employment rubbish, forget it. Just worry about what the employee's doing at home. That's what you're facing. The average day at home is more fulfilling for the average knowledge worker than a day in the average office. So no longer can you afford to be average. You have to rise your game up. The industry has to accept. It has to do an amazing experience on a daily basis. Any of you familiar with this phrase? Form follows function. Arabs must love this phrase. It must be tattooed on people as they arrive in the door, right? It's if you're a design professional, form follows function. It's the mandate you must subscribe to. Otherwise, you're an artist or a sculptor, right? But if you go back and look in the history books, form does follow function, but purpose comes first. Because you can't define the functional requirements of a space if nobody's defined what the purpose of the space is. And this is, we believe, what is being missed in industry at the moment. Too many organizations issuing mandates of how much they expect people in office without defining what it is they want them to do in the office and why. So back to Steve's point, and that's why I bought a few copies of the book, Why Workplace? If you can't answer that question, and if your exco can't answer that question, close the workplace. Think of yourself in a lift, right? And chief exec walks in with somebody external, clearly a senior stakeholder from outside the organization, and you're introduced as the head of facilities management, the head of workplace for that organization by your chief exec, who sort of knows you. And this senior stakeholder suddenly says, so tell me, like you had work, you got on for months without workplaces. Why do you need all this shit? What is all this stuff doing? If you can't answer the question, if the chief exec can't answer the question, pack up, go home. You must define the purpose of workplace, which is the previous Simon Sinek book. So we're a bit of a Simon Sinek fan at Leastman, because he's such a good storyteller, but he condensed it down to some really simple things. Another one, Steve should have mentioned, you should put this all in your pitch as well. Listen to the search for the YouTube one about the Four Seasons hotel barista who loves his job. It's a perfect illustration to FMs all around the world of why you need to invest in every aspect of your customer-facing service. So it's the Four Seasons, Noah the barista. Check that one out as well. Anyway, look, purpose comes first. You've got to define the purpose if you're going to cascade the model back from there. Neil's getting twitchy and looking at the laptop, which must mean I'm overrunning on time. The employer is responsible for the purpose. It's not your job. I'm all right, am I good? Okay. The employer is responsible for the purpose. Your exco need to define the purpose. They've got to say what it is they expect the employees to do when they come to the workplace. If they can't, challenge them on it. And that's what my role has developed into. I'm now working with excos all around the world, helping them get to that definition. You can do it in about half a day if they're willing. You wouldn't believe how many are a bit frosty when you ask them that question. What do you mean, why do I need a workplace? I'm an energy generation company. I've got people working in nuclear power stations. Yeah, we get that bit. But what about all your admin people? What about all your contact center handlers? Why do they need offices? You didn't have offices for them for 6 months. So give me a reason. And you hold them to account in why they need offices, why they need workplaces in the future. Right, that's the outcomes bit of the whole equation. In the middle, we got the functional bit. Function is what employees do. It's a byproduct of the purpose. If the purpose is to fuel innovation, then the functional requirements are for employees to come in and feel innovative, right? One follows the other. Once you've defined that we want to fuel innovation, employees know that they've got to come in and functionally be innovative, well, then you can go on and you can look at the infrastructure needed to support innovation. It's different to the infrastructure needed to support concentration, right? So you've got to work with this cascade backwards. And if they're sequentially dependent, so if the exco won't give you the reasons, you're pretty much guessing in the middle of territory here as to what the whole thing is for. Because the game has changed. Employees have got their homes, and their homes are more effective at the majority of work they do than the majority of the offices you provide. So first comes purpose, then function, and then you're on to form. So what's the purpose of the post-pandemic workplace? Think of it as the reason for which it exists. Engage your executive leadership in those questions. Then you can go out and you can brief your supply chain, whether that's a designer, an architect, a broker looking for a new building, supply chain around the whole service delivery, define the purpose. And we do a little game. I met somebody on the way in who's into workwear. There we go. What was your name? I forgot your name. Andy. Andy's into workwear. One of our clients, one of the exercises we did, we said, right, you need to get this down. This sentence needs to be so short, everybody remembers it. And everybody looked at me with slightly blank expression, as lots of people do when I run a workshop, right? And then you get them fired up and hopefully you get something out of them in the end. But we came out at the end with this beautiful, crisp sentence. You know what I said, Andy? That we're going to go and get that embroidered on every single member of the team's workwear. So that every day somebody puts their t-shirt on in the morning before they come to the work, they know why we employ them. Brilliant idea, right? So something catchy, something memorable that everybody can sign up to. That's what you can get to in a half-day workshop around why workplace. It's a brilliant proposition. Right, So what do you want a workplace to do? So the academics, Dr. Peggy Roth and her team, squirreled through the data and they found some patterns. And basically the purposes of workplace condensed down and synthesized mathematically into 4 principal areas. So productivity, getting stuff done, meeting and collaborating, the we work, not the me work on the left, community and culture, the rocket fueled we stuff, and then at the end, pride, and it's all the more internalized values. So which bit do you want, right? These are the outcomes that you can have if you have a great workplace. So define which one you want. Now, you could come back and say, well, hang on a minute, it's a great workplace. I want it to do all of those things. You can if you want, there's nothing wrong with that, but expect your space to have to work significantly harder if it's going to compete with home on all those things. Because homes have one thing in most instances that your offices really suck at: acoustic privacy. The open plan office has killed acoustic privacy. And as workers become more complex and more concentrative, acoustic privacy is more in need than ever before. People wearing their headsets in the open plan office is because you're lacking, you rob them of the acoustic privacy that particular individual needs to focus and concentrate. Little fact, Leesman facts coming out here. You can listen to 1.6 conversations without any problem at all, right? Which means that if somebody's on a video call next to you, you're half listening to their call. 0.6 of your head can tune into that call that they're on if they're doing a video call in open plan. But with video calls, something starts messing with your head because you can only hear half the other conversation. So your mind goes in mental flips trying to work out what the other party is saying on the call when your colleague suddenly says, no, I don't agree with that. What don't they agree with? It's like, or I'm going to fire that contractor. He was useless anyway. Which contractor? Right? And your mind's going through these loops. It'd be easier, frankly, if they just put it on speaker and you tune out like you used to when people just had conversations around the open plan. So all of these things are going on with the open plan landscape and the return to office with behavioral changes. We need to fix them. Or you might say, actually, one of these is more important than the other. And if it's more important than the other, then you stand a much better chance of stacking up that function after the form component. Right, so some stats for you. It's a Leesman presentation, so you've got to have some more numbers. 50% of employees select 8 out of our 21 activities as an important part of their day in the office. So we've now got those 8. Those are the 8 most common activities that the modern office, the post-pandemic office, needs to support. We also know which features they expect to be brilliantly provided when they come into the office. There are 23 of those. That's pretty easy stuff. Mathematically, if you've got a son or a daughter doing their A-levels in maths, they could do this in a few minutes, right? This is not difficult. This isn't where the PhDs earn their money. This is where the PhDs earn the money. And we're losing a little bit of on the right under the Zoom desktop setup. But what we've done here is mapped which infrastructure items support which activities. So there is a statistical relationship within the survey between those factors. So what you can see across there on desk and room booking systems, and there's another one coming up down here, restaurants and canteens. So restaurant and canteens needs one thing, and I can't remember what the hell it is that it supports at the other end, but it's in the book. Whereas desk and room booking system is supporting 6 things across its line. Neil, our fonts did go a bit weird there. Oh, where's he gone? He's run up. No, look. Yeah, hiding at the back. We were just having a discussion about shipping things from Mac to PCs. Right, so the last column is relaxing and taking a break. So we need a desk and room booking system statistically and maps to relaxing and taking a break. Maybe it's the anxiety of going away from your desk to relax or take a break and wondering whether your desk is going to be released because you've got a facility manager who's got some little time clock rocking on the system, right? So those are the things that are changing the way people consume workplace. Whereas at the bottom in the stack, restaurants and canteens is only associated with relaxing or taking a break. Now, I might argue that if you did your work really well, you could get people to associate it with collaborative activities. You could get them to associate it with meetings. We see that commonly within the data, that the more investment you make in your food and beverage offer, satisfaction with meeting rooms goes up. Not because people love your meeting rooms, it's because they love going to the restaurant or cafe and having a great coffee with no other barista. You need to watch the video to understand that. But the barista fuels a sort of social enterprise in an organization. What we can also see then on the stack is that there are some things, individual focused work needs 3 principal infrastructure items to meet with likely satisfaction from the employee. Noise levels, Statistically, it's the biggest destroyer of productivity agreement, dissatisfaction with noise. A desk and a chair, obvious, right? But if we go over to the right-hand column, oh, it's disappeared. Well, in the book, if you're quick and you grab one or you download it online, you'll see that relaxing and taking a break needs loads of things to support it. It needs a desk, a chair, desk and room booking systems, we mentioned already, quiet rooms. There's a whole list of things that infrastructure-wise, relaxing and taking a break needs in order to be fully fueled in an organization. So the stats are all there. Right, so look, here's the list of the form features that you need to be really doubly thinking about. These are your sort of hygiene factors, if you like, for the contemporary effective workplace. The functional requirements that your employees are most likely to be looking for your workplaces to support, now in that middle column. And then you've got one of 4 purposes to think about, which is your primary. So imagine if you had this report in your hands, a few copies here, and you started with 3 different colored markers, marking up which things you could control, which things you can influence, and which things you've got to accept. And you'll all be different because there'll be different infrastructures that you run in different ways under different mandates. But I'd really urge you to think about that, because you're impacting, whether you like it or not, people's mental health and well-being through social isolation. You're impacting return to office mandates through whether or not that workplace is better than the home. You're impacting nighttime economies all around your offices. The impact of your work as facility management professionals has ripples that go way, way further than you can possibly imagine. That's how workplace has changed in terms of this new sort of consumer-driven approach to the consumption of workplace. Right, last few stats, and then I'm just going to liven you up with a little game at the end. Right. Sometimes or frequently socially disconnected from colleagues. Really interesting. It's not generational. This is where, you know, there's so much talk of the Gen Xs, right? The millennials. Pretty much the same as the rest of us. But sometimes feeling socially disconnected, there is a gender difference. And I really want you to take that away and think about the impact of your work, therefore, on mental well-being. Right. Control, influence, or set the minimum viable office. So I've effectively given you an imprint of the things, your new hygiene factors, the things that have got to meet not just minimum requirement, but enhanced satisfaction in order for that employee to set their alarm for 6:30 a.m. to be at the desk for 9, or set it for 8:30 to be downstairs at their desk for 9. Big imposition on the daily life of an employee, right? And your quality of workplace experience impacts when they set their alarm clock in the morning. The report's online. I've got some paper copies here because those of you who know us well know that we love graphic information, storytelling stuff. So my team have done an amazing job, not just academically, but from a data visualization and storytelling perspective. And there's a little essay from me at the front just to try and scene set. But I want to take you back to Vitra, because I think there's something really interesting in this space. These are the most recent photographs. It's just been, you'll see that the furniture has just been refreshed with the new products that Vitra have in the market or been upholstered. So this is 23 years after those first images I showed you. And what you'll see as I take you through these images, who said that? I heard somebody whisper, it's the same. It's the same. Yes, it's the same. 23 years later, it still works. I took a client there 3 years ago and I said, this is mind-blowing. This is so far out in the future, it scares the shit out of me. It's like, okay, let me show you some photographs. This has been around for 20 years. What do you think people felt like when we bought them here? I didn't take them there. My first visit was in like mid 2000s. So like, this is what it takes to create spaces that inspire. It takes a bit of bravery. It takes a bit of pushing to the future. It takes taking a wrinkly tin distribution warehouse with a concrete floor and a wrinkly concrete roof and sling a few acoustic panels in. Be brave in your treatment of space and the experience you deliver, and people come away from their day at work feeling more energized than they did when they got there in the morning. That's what you can do. So the library is still the same. Furniture's changed a bit, new rug on the floor, books are still the same. The coffee space on the front, different table, different chairs, still the same view, still the same coffee point. There's probably even the same people hanging around the coffee point. And there's the hot desks. Exactly the same as I worked on when I worked for Vitra before Leaseman. Now, I'd like you to think about one thing else. I've given you lots to think about. I apologize. You thought you were coming out for a nice chilled evening with Joanna and the crew. It's not. It's hard work this evening. I'd like you to think about another thing. Return on experience investment. You're all challenged about the value proposition of facilities management, the write-off, the write-down, all of that stuff. I want you to think about it, this space, right? The furniture changed a bit. They repainted the white walls once a year on their PPM, so it always looked fresh. And if Rolf was coming around, probably every week. But right, that's how they kept that space looking original and fresh and energized every day for 23 years. I think that's a pretty good return on experience investment. No capital investment in that space in the whole 23-year period of any magnitude. And one thing that has changed, look at the shape of the table in that room. So it's a video-first communication world shaped table. So there are subtle changes that you need to make quickly. There's one thing they've got wrong in this room, though, almost, but they've done a correction because they're incredibly clever people. And Savile is probably the best designer I've ever worked around in the world. If you're neurodiverse, I want you to think about the experience you would have dialing in to a video call in that room. Because the camera is on top of the TV. The projector's not showing it brilliantly well at the back of the room. If you're challenged with neurodiversity conditions, some of them will mean that you don't see the meeting going on in that room. You just see the people walking past the other side of the glazed elevation. This is a typical example of something you could change tomorrow. If the camera angle in your meeting rooms is such that it points out to a busy corridor with a glazed elevation separating the corridor from the room, change the room direction, the camera direction in that room to think about not just the people who are experiencing your workplace, but the people experiencing it on the other end of the call. Now, because they're clever people, what you might see is a little curtain track. So they can now pull the curtain track around. So they've got visual privacy, not just for themselves, but for the people dialing into the call. So another little gesture. How much does a curtain track and a curtain cost you to change the experience that everybody has of that space? So shout out what you read here quickly. First person, lady who whispered. What do you read? Opportunities nowhere. You've done this before, haven't you, Paul? 70% of people read opportunities nowhere. I want you to read opportunities now here. You have, as an industry, as a profession, the biggest opportunity that's ever been gifted to you to put value into the profession, to take this to a whole nother level. You're like the customer satisfaction people on rocket fuel. Your chief executives suddenly will be inviting you into the boardroom if you can change the number of people who show up in the office each day. We're doing a study for one financial services organization, another one of Flavio's clients. They've asked us to test adherence to mandates. They've got a really strict mandate and they're confused as to why nobody's adhering to it. It's all there in the data why they're not adhering to it. And that's in your control. If you show this to primary school kids, guess what they read? Opportunity, snow here. Right. Any questions? Stunned silence. Thank you.
Are there any legalities on? Sorry, is that just a sec? I can shout that. Yeah, for the people online, aren't you? Hi. Are there any legalities that you know on the mandate for people to have to come in? How do they legally stand, companies?
Depends which country you're in. Culturally, different countries have got different sort of rules and regulations about this, but I'm sort of, are there any other CEOs in the room? I think CEOs get a bit of a bad rap these days in terms of mandates. We're working with JP Morgan. You've probably read all of the sort of, you know, the LinkedIn or the regurgitated propositions for JP Morgan have said, if you're MD and above, we expect you in the office 4+ days a week, right? That's what the journalist reports that Jamie said. I don't think anybody that I work with at JP Morgan has read that mandate. What they've said is we would prefer an office first culture. There was always an office first culture before, and it's returning to an office first culture now. But if you're a wealth manager looking after some incredibly rich individual somewhere in the world, you were never in the damned office anyway, you were out with them. So there's a realism that's got to be applied to mandates. And I think when you read a mandate, I think you've got to take it a little bit with a pinch of salt. Standard Chartered have got an interesting problem. Bill Winters, their chief exec, came out really early with the property team obviously supporting him. There's some great people at Standard Chartered, got some awesome lessons. If you can ever get them to one of the events, get them to do a case study. One of the most fastest moving teams we work with in the world. They came with out about 6 months after the main sort of, after we'd got over that first bump in the COVID path. And they said, simple mandate, twice the experience, half the space by 2025. People were like, what? And they're like, no, we're going to give you better experience, but we're going to do it in less space because we all trust you to work from home. There's no mandate in Standard Chartered, and they're very proud of it. If you look up Tanuj, their head of people globally, she's on loads of videos you can see on LinkedIn and on YouTube and stuff talking about this non-mandate. They've got a problem. They've got more people coming back than they've expected because they feel trusted. And they've got a property team who've been empowered to deliver twice the experience. Now, when you deliver half the space, there's also something quite interesting happens. There's a whole load of cash sloshing around to spend on FM services because the headline cost is in the rent, rates and service charge. When we did some hypothetical maths with Standard Chartered, it's in one of our earlier reports. There's a little reference in my Why Workplace book. 18% less space, and everything from thereafter, everything you save on space, you could double your spend on FM services, literally. There isn't a single facility manager that we spoke to in the research of the book who would know what to do with twice their budget. Right? They're like, look, that doesn't. No, go away and ask me a proper question. Nobody's ever going to give me twice the budget. But what if they did? What would you do with it? I don't know. No idea. Well, think of things because it might happen to you soon. Last thing on that, we had a client who wanted to go out to market for an FM bid, 3 to 4 year term contract. And they challenged their procurement team to go out to market with, could we secure bids for the highest quality experience that the contractor dares pitch at us at a price? And their procurement team said, we don't know how to write a contract that does that, a market inquiry that does that. So no, literally, we just want you to go out and ask the industry how awesome it thinks it can provide us with FM services. Like, no, you can't do that. Why? Because there's no competitiveness to it. No, there is. We've asked them to price it. And we still go with the best price for the best service level. We're just interested to feel what the industry feels it could offer us. And the procurement team said, no, sorry, industry wouldn't accept it. We can't do that for you. So I think there is a sort of wave of creativity around mandates, office attendance, procurement strategies, experiential design. And I would ride it. I don't know which industry you're in, but I think if you can do anything around that mandate proposition that says, the better the experience, the less you have to mandate, the more people will come. That's basically what we see in the data. Joanna.
Is this the death of the procurement team?
I'm sure there's a few of you who would wish for that day. No, I don't think so. I think the procurement team have a lot of help they can give us, but I think what we need to do is slightly sort of, like all of us have had to do post-pandemic, just shift slightly our velocity, our trajectory, and then up our velocity slightly. I think procurement teams, if they understood the statistical relationship with adherence to mandate or non-mandated attendance levels, and they understood that a 15 to 20% drop in your net lettable area would enable you to double the expenditure on food and beverage without even blinking. And F&B spend directly relates to the pleasure that somebody has when they come to a workplace, big smiles on their face. We did a study for Wells Fargo, really interesting little thing you can do yourselves. First 15, it actually bubbled down, we reckoned the first 10. First 10 minutes of consumption when somebody arrives at your building colors the rest of their day. And we do a little thing in a workshop. How many of you employ reception staff members, like front desk people? Okay, give me, like how many of you do it in different markets around the world? Yeah? What's the cheapest market for you for a member of a reception service, would you say, in the world? India. How much would in pounds roughly, would a really, would a reception member of staff cost you in India? It's not an exam question, just give me a rough number. A year, yeah, equal sum. How much? A few thousand pounds. How much would they typically cost you in your most expensive market? Anybody? 30? Anybody? I heard the ones at the Shard are only about twice that much. Right? So the market difference between reception, hospitality, front desk staff is huge. Right, the next question is, how much is a really, really engaging, smiley member of hospitality staff compared to the cost for a really miserable, disengaged, head downs member of staff? The exam question, the answer is no difference at all.
I have 1 to 7.
1 to 7.
1 to 7 employees.
In what respect? Sorry?
Reception.
Reception, yeah. But the point is, how much does a miserable receptionist cost you?
Well, 6 people over 7.
Yeah, but the same price, the same salary as the happy one, right? It's not how much you spend on the service, it's how you deliver the service that the consumer experiences, right? Remember Bananarama if you're that old. It's not what you do, it's the way you do it.
But it's about the window to the world tip.
Yeah.
It's the first person you make contact with, whether it's on the telephone, if you have a switchboard or whatever, or the person on reception.
How many of you forgot your security pass one day?
Oh.
Right, so you can be told that that's the third time you've done it. If you do it again, we're going to email your manager and it's going to be a 25 quid fine. That's what we get if we lose our passes at the office group. They charge us a bloody fortune a desk per month. And they want to charge £25 to replace one of these. Stupid. It's like, why penny pinch on that type of stuff? What you're creating is a disenfranchisement, right? Deliver the service with a smile, deliver it with a hospitality orientation. And guess what? Employees love the rest of their day. Any others?
Just to say, if you'd met the lady upstairs when you arrived, she was a fine example of the warm welcome.
100%
that we
agree.
need to
Yep.
provide everyone.
Yep. My best experience in London, by a long way, UBS. If any of you have experienced the UBS hospitality experience, even arriving there as a supplier to them, experience was impeccably designed. Citibank in New York, in Manhattan on the Lower West Side. If you're ever in New York and you can get into Citibank's reception area, unbelievable energy and power in communicating the brand. By far and away the best retail bank reception space I've ever sat in. Awesome.
Tim, fascinating presentation. Thank you. I'm just interested in the connection. I appreciate you probably have a completely whole presentation on this, but the discussion this evening has been about needing to get people back into the workplace. I think we're absolutely fully on board with that. But what about the connection to productivity? Does your research provide any correlation between if you get more people into the office, that business then has X% or whatever it might be of productivity?
Yeah, it's more than a whole presentation. It's probably a whole symposium on that one topic. My view, and I think it's in the front of the Workplace Reset book, I talk about this a little bit. I think the industry went down a rabbit hole about 15 years ago. There was a whole lot of professionals, some of them very good friends of mine, who were challenged by this problem. We need to prove that better workplace delivers better productivity. And it couldn't do it. Nobody in the industry could do it. And I believe in hindsight it's because of a really simple reason. There is no transferable universal measure of productivity output, right? Even if you're a bank, your inbound contact center has a different measure of success to your outbound contact center. Your fraud team have a different measure of success to your engineers developing the apps. So even within one organization, you can't define a single measure of productivity. But what the industry did 15 years ago, and you may all have been party to this in some sort of subservient way, I certainly was, is that the industry moved to say, we can come up with a different equation that's quite smart and quite clever, and you'll like it. We're going to measure the productivity of space. And what we're going to do is measure how many people we can fit in space, because then we've got rent over occupant density, and that gives us a productivity indicator for space. Stephen Boyd's predecessors at the Government Property Agency did that, and they ended up sardine tinning people into space so that they hated work. It is not a successful measure of productivity. No. What you can do is ask somebody universally in 40 plus languages in 100 plus countries around the world, does the design of your workplace enable you to work productively? It's not quite as accurate as we'd like, any of us in the industry, but I believe it's as universal and it's as close as we're going to get. And you can ask everybody from the chairman to the doorman the same question. Do you have the stuff you need to be awesome at your job? And if you don't, tell us what things are subserving you that we can seek to improve to make that day a productive day at work. Because the productive day at home is acute. The productivity agreement figures are way in excess at home. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. The first one is acoustic privacy. Any activity that benefits from visual or acoustic privacy is almost certainly better supported at home, especially if you've carved out your own private space. And we've seen a year-on-year increase in the number of people who have their own space at home to work from privately. So the competition for you all is getting acute outside. There are thousands and thousands of people who've gone down to B&Q and Wix. They've converted their garage or the shed or the loft or the kids' bedroom because the kids are at uni, and they've got an awesome workplace. And you don't come around with your clear desk policy moaning about the coffee cups and the elastic bands they've left out. All right. So all of that is driving them away from the office experience. And at home, if they're in a beautifully adjusted chair that you sent home, guess what? Nobody moves it tomorrow when they're not in the office. It doesn't take them 5 minutes to get comfy again. So there's all sorts of psychology things going on in terms of that tension between the home and the office. You know, they're ordering the widescreen computer that the teenagers got in their bedroom next door because their IT department said they can only have a monitor that wide. I've even got it in my own organisation. My own FD won't let me replace the widescreen monitors in our own office. He says it's too expensive. So that's the type of tension that happens in the office compared to the experience that happens at home.
So we.
I think that's an interesting point, because has the cost of working actually now, you know, I'd see my team buying the widescreen TVs. They're not expensing it back to the business. They're just, so instead of paying for the commute, they're paying for the widescreen.
Exactly. Yeah.
That wasn't actually going to be my question. It was just, that was really interesting. I think my question was, and it's maybe a little bit softer topic, is in the sociability or socializing element with what you were talking about. Do you have the data for pre-pandemic for males versus females? I mean, have men always been shit at socializing?
No. No.
The answer is no, because that data actually is from a study that we've started with MIT. So it's a 3-year longitudinal study called The Hybrid Future. You see it on my water bottle. I was trying to advertise that a little bit subliminally as I took a swig. The Hybrid Future has got, Flavio, 12 participants at the moment, corporate organizations. Thank you. Anybody can join. And basically, your employees become lab rats in our longitudinal experiment with us to try and understand what's happening to them in their lives. So the impact of hybrid working on employers, employees, and wider society. So those questions were more recent and highlights of where we see tension and potential risk in what hybrid might mean for us all through its mass adoption. Generally speaking, we think hybrid is a good thing. I mean, I graduated as an architect interior designer. We were on site, we were in the office, you were out with a supplier. So I've always worked hybrid. I think the idea that hybrid is new is a wrong proposition. It's been around for decades. It's just that we've rocket fueled it, like 15 years worth of advancement in 5 months during the pandemic. In terms of male and female, up until then, as I said, the presentation that Julie asked me to give to the Women in FM group, we see marginal flutters in the data by gender. So this is the first big spike in gender. My mate, who I mentioned it to over a beer, they said, that's absolute rubbish. We just don't need it. We're not as high maintenance when it comes to social as those women who need to talk to their daughters, their sisters, their mothers, their aunts, their grands, everybody, every flipping day. They walk around the house. And he went off on a little rant about the difference between men and women in terms of social connectivity. But I think there is also another, we had a symposium in our own office last week, and we're backing a small charity of careers after babies. I think there are some return to work mums who have acutely different issues that might be fluttering in that data. I think that is an area that we need to be more sensitive to as well at the moment. So, one last question, I think. Is that right, Paul?
About me, yeah. Check. Yeah.
That's fine.
Right. So I think that how to measure the productivity of people, right? So I manage 3 buildings with 3 different business models. And I noticed that every building is a different entity. However, the problem is how to measure the productivity of people. So I can, your presentation is good, but at the end of the day, I have to stick with the data. So I need to stick with the productivity of people, what is worth in terms of hosting them into the workplace, despite of the diversity and the gender. So everybody needs attention. And at the end of the day, I'm thinking to employ a psychologist. So what's the relationship between data, productivity, and what actually is sustainable for the business and for the revenue?
Yeah, well, I would argue that the sustainable proposition is to close the office and let people work from home.
Right?
Because if it's
That's what we do actually.
Yeah, because if it's a focused, concentrative, deep task, you can read the work of Linda Grattan. She's by far and away, in my opinion, one of the world's leaders in this stuff at the moment. The complexity of work. Work has become more complex. So any one of your employees who's in a concentrative task where they have a sort of metronomic consistency to the type of work they're doing needs more and more visual and acoustic privacy to perform well. And if you're in an industry with a elevated sort of salary bands, so somebody's got their own home, probably a multi-room home, then the chances are they'll have carved out a private space for themselves, and it's hyper designed around their needs. So you might not need offices at all, or you might need them for just part. You might need them for the social fabric and not for the concentrative. But what I'd urge you to do is really double down with your line of business heads in establishing what is the metric of productivity within each team. because teams have different output measures of productivity. And one experiment we did, one thing we were seeing, we weren't involved in the experiment, with a technology company, communications company, who measured the productivity of their developers writing lines of code. If you measure lines of code as a measure of productivity, engineers working remote write more code in an 8-hour day than they do when they're in the office. End of, yeah? Yeah. But that organization then looked at program milestones. And there were more milestones missed when engineers were working remotely. Because what they found is that engineers working remotely don't talk to each other. They're pretty introverted people anyway, right? And if they're working remote, you've got to force the damn people to talk to each other. So when they came to actually stitch the code together, it was buggier than when the employees worked in the office together. So you've also got to be a little bit more sophisticated than simply measuring one index. You've got to find out what's the goal of that team. Is it innovation? Is it speed to market? What is it that, think of like first call resolution in the retail banking sector, right? If you've got a customer contact center. If you're on the end of a distraught call, somebody's been a victim of fraud, right? Does that employee want to be at home when they've been speaking to somebody who's in tears at the other end because they've seen thousands of pounds disappear from their account? Or do they want to be next to a colleague who they can come off the call with afterwards and say, like, awful, 70-year-old, pension has just been robbed again. What are we doing about it? And they can actually share their negative experiences with people. So I think what you've got to do is be acutely decisive about what the measure of productivity is for that individual, and then look at it next to our data or similar data to see whether you can correlate and see patterns between experience and output.
Thank you.
So it's multidimensional, it's parametric. So
The acoustic privacy is actually a good point.
massive acoustic privacy.
I get this as a take on, yeah.
Just one last thing, Paul, which I think is really interesting. We were here last week with our friends at Arup. Some of the stuff now you can do with parametric data in terms of AI-driven design is going to blow your minds in about the next 18 months. Right, so we're hoping to be part of that with our friends at Arup, but it's literally bubbling away under the surface at the moment. And if you're ever in Amsterdam, go and look at a building called The Valley in the South Axe, just as you come in from Schiphol into the city centre. It's designed by Edge, one of the most advanced developers in the world. I would strongly suggest anybody just Google the building. It was designed by an algorithm, and it's awesome. It's just won the award for the best design skyscraper in the world. Absolutely mind-blowing. So look at what technology is going to do if you start capturing the data. If you've got Revit driven through your businesses, drive it harder. Data is going to be the thing for the next generation. Is that good?
Fantastic.
Thanks, Paul.
Well, I've got the difficult job of bringing Tim's presentation to an end because we could listen all night. I don't think AI is going to replace Tim anytime soon, which is fantastic. Thank you, Tim, and the easy job of saying thank you very much. And can we all show our appreciation for Tim in the usual way? Thank you, Tim. Fantastic. Yes. Yeah, just to share with you, I was slightly distracted seeing the Vitra because I was looking at a YouTube video last night on how to repair the cistern in our toilet, which is a Vitra toilet. So different Vitra, but thank God for YouTube. So yeah, excellent. So I'm going to hand back to Steve before we have some time of networking together. Thank you.
Thanks, thanks, Paul and Tim. On behalf of the committee, the ISIG, the IWFM, thank you again for a wonderful presentation. I'm sure I speak for our chair designate, Steph Welsh, when I say, can we invite you back for a 6th presentation at next year's AGM? Yes. From my perspective, on a personal note, you give me so much information, insight, data for when I do training with the IWFM and when I lecture at university. It's always in my presentations talking about what you're doing, what a wonderful job you're doing. 3 other thanks before we get to those drinks. Neil Everett, I'm sure he's there. Not too sure who else is there from the IWFM support team, but Neil Everett and the IWFM support team, thank you for a wonderful job you do, not just tonight for helping with tonight's AGM, but also for the wonderful work you do throughout the year to support all of us as members. Thank you. To our chair designate, Steph Welsh, and all of the team at Arups, thank you for hosting tonight. They've got the job of cleaning up after us all, not me because I'm not there, but thanks for all of that team. And the Good Eating Company, who I think are going to provide us with some hospitality now, with some networking drinks. And finally, everyone that's there as a participant, whether you're online or whether you're there tonight in the Arup's office, thank you for coming along. And if you're new, if you've not been to one of these events before, don't hesitate to kind of latch on to Paul or Joanna, Andy, Neil, people you've seen up there. Introduce yourselves, but have a great night and hope to see you in person at some more events in 2024. That's it from me. Enjoy your drinks. Take care, team.
What do you want to do with us now?
Everybody go out, please, eat, drink and be merry.
Sally to white slavers for a waiting.
Yeah, well, Thank you.